time, it's one of the greatest commodities.
House of Ani, now available at Amazon.com. You are listening to the Living Superfood Show.
Hi everyone, my name is Umoya, and this is the Living Superfood Show. I know usually we have Petey on with us, but today we have a special guest, and that special guest is named Bani, and she's from Sri Lanka. So how you doing today, Bani?
Hi, I'm great. Rainy day here in
Right.
Sri Lanka.
Nice. Okay. Well, I guess let's get into it right now. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Sri Lankan, but I actually grew up, or at least my first few years was in Nigeria, where we kind of lived away from the city. And I feel that may be one of the reasons why I think agriculture and all of that is kind of important and interesting. I grew up in Africa, then came back to Sri Lanka in my teenage years. Sri Lanka was a bit of a mess at that point. There was a civil war going on. And so, because of that, my education got halted halfway through. Ended up going to the US to do my higher studies, university. And then I decided I wanted to come back and see what I could do in Sri Lanka. Um, been in a couple of industries. I do human resources right now. Been in the apparel trade. I'm in IT right now. Um, and of course, through COVID, I think everybody's lives changed. And I think what came into my life was agriculture. So I guess I'm a person of many trades. Does that help? Is that enough information?
Yeah, I think that definitely does. And if at the end, if there's anything that you want to expand on, we can definitely do that. So just curious, for those that don't know what Sri Lanka means, like myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the people who are listening may not know what Sri Lanka means. Can you explain to the audience, the listeners, what Sri Lanka means?
Okay. Let me start with a little bit about where Sri Lanka is. It's a little island below India, very separate from India, even though everybody seems to think we are part of India, we're not. We got our independence from the British colonization in 1948. And we're a little island, a very resourceful island. And that's actually what Sri Lanka means. It's a highly resourceful island of plenty. And I think that's justified by the range of landscapes you have in Sri Lanka, ranging from beautiful beaches to the high mountains, to gemstones, to a lot of agriculture. And it's pretty plentiful. So I think that explains the name Sri Lanka, which is kind of the name we got after we got our independence in 1948.
Okay. Does the Sri Lankan government subsidize farmers, or are farmers on their own to support their farms financially?
The Sri Lankan government does support farmers, but I think they need to do a little bit more towards organic farming or natural farming. So there is agriculture is a big trade in Sri Lanka. It's a small island, but anything seems to grow on the island. So agriculture is pretty big. But in order to um, have enough growing in Sri Lanka for ourselves, I think over the last 20, 30 years or even longer, there seems to have been a lot of um, fertilizer, pest control, all of that that has come in. So there is subsidies, but I would say from what I'm learning and what I'm trying to get into, there isn't enough support on natural or organic farming. So yeah, there is support, but maybe not in the right areas, in my opinion.
Okay. With a background in IT and apparel, and especially human resources or talent management, what sparked your interest in sustainable farming?
Okay, so I guess if you look at my career, it has always been around people. So all these different industries that you mentioned is because of that. Human resources, I did start in the banking industry, then I joined the apparel industry, then went into other sorts of production, and then finally into IT. That's where I am working right now. I do a part-time job in human resources, but when COVID hit, well, actually a little bit before COVID, like most people are, I'm thinking of my retirement plan, and one of the thoughts I had was I would like to have a plot of land somewhere and kind of make that my retirement plan. But COVID hit. And when you looked around as to how people were scrambling for food and also realizing you couldn't really find healthy, good food, I got lucky and I happened to have, acquired some land before that and met a farmer who kind of settled in there. So we thought through COVID, what can we do to kind of you know, find it useful for ourselves. So it just so happened we kind of started creating a home garden, and then that kind of sparked my interest to see, how can we do it better? Um, what works in Sri Lanka, what doesn't work in Sri Lanka, and before I knew it, I, had many things growing on it beyond the home garden. The wider land has coconut and king coconut growing on it, which are the main two crops. We've just started a home garden, and now we're looking at how we can make it, financially viable. Sorry, excuse me. Financially viable projects. So we're looking at other ways to continue to make it more sustainable and support the community in that area. So I guess when I look at it, it's still dealing with people. So I think it's still sort of linked to human resources.
Okay.
Only thing is now I'm dealing with a different kind of person. I've been mostly in white collar. I'm going into blue collar is how I see it now. But I find it's a lot more of a natural, a lot more um, community-based environment, which is I find can be very different to corporate. And I'm kind of excited to explore how I can use my human resource talent and experience to one, develop the farm, develop the community in that area, because I think agriculture is the future in the world, not just Sri Lanka. And I feel in Sri Lanka we can do it better.
Okay. So agriculture is a big business today, and I know definitely in the U.S. it is, and I'm sure it is in Sri Lanka as well. So how do you think you can compete with that and still be sustainable?
Um, so I think that all starts with the corporate, if I may digress a bit. In other words, it has become a big business because we are so greedy. If you are willing to share and kind of not always want to just keep increasing and increasing and adding, it is sustainable, it is affordable, you can make it a lifestyle. But for some reason, capitalism has kind of taken over the world, and whatever you earn is not enough. Hence, why the big corporates are making it a lot more commercial oriented and not really looking at um, product and what they're growing as what it's meant to be. It's supposed to nourish and provide sustainability in terms of food and nourishment, which I think is what the corporates are doing. What I have learned watching the farmers, talking to lots of the farmers who I've met over the last 6 to 8 months, is their lifestyle is pretty simple. So um, keeping your life simple and continuing to make this a way of living and it providing enough for you to have a life is possible. But of course, if you want to be a millionaire and a billionaire, then farming is a bit of a tough one. So I think it's that balance. At least that's why I got into farming, because I felt in the corporate world you're in a rat race. You're always just asking for more, and there is no end to it. Nothing is good enough. versus this kind of grounded me a little bit in realizing you have to put a lot of effort, but what you put in, you do get back. And you can actually do a pretty good job in having this farm or create a, kind of running the farm, keeping me happy, getting what I need, getting what my family needs, providing a livelihood for, 5 or 6 people around the farm at the moment. And it's possible to live, a healthy, good life. But that's kind of not what the corporate sort of set out. I think it's more about how much more you can make. And I know this lifestyle because I'm in human resources. That's what I did in the other world, or the world I deal with right now. So I think, to answer your question, it's possible, but you kind of do need to have a more managed expectation instead of this never ending wanting more concept. If you balance that out, I think farming is great for not just me, for a lot of people. But if you want to make it, you want to just keep adding to your wealth, then it becomes a corporate business. And then I feel, will fall trap into what the big corporates are doing. And when I think of Sri Lanka and the self-sufficiency of Sri Lanka before, and the trap we've fallen into, which is exactly what I'm trying to, change in my small way, to show people around the farming community that you can do it well, you can do it positively, and you can make it a living. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you do talk about sustainability, and I know some farms use toxins and chemicals. Can you explain what you're trying to do in your farm in terms of trying not to use those toxins and other chemicals to have more sustainability with the farmers and farms you're working with?
So I think there are two things. The first thing I've learned is, you're right. I wanted to try and keep it, as they call it, organic. But I also realize organic, the term is a lot of certification, and then you kind of go into a whole heap of corporate style activity, which is not really where I want to take the farm. So I use the word natural. In other words, what I was trying to do was to use natural ways to fertilize the land, natural insect repellents, so on and so forth, so that I felt what we were consuming from my farm would be healthy, would not, cause any of the problems that we're talking about right now. But you do, in trying to get there, one of the things I've started learning by talking to farmers, farmers who are interested in this whole natural side of farming, is that there is a little bit of a controversy, or a little bit of a commercialization that goes on in there. So what I mean by that is, if you think of the vegetables, etc., that you find in the supermarkets in Sri Lanka, those are hybrids or products that you have found, um, that have come from other parts of the world. So one of the first reasons those kinds of products were brought into the country was to try and get the yield that is required, as part of the corporate or the commercialization of making more and more. In order to do that, in order to get more than the natural yield, you end up having to um, over nourish it, put extra fertilizer, pest control, so on and so forth. So hence that whole cycle that has been created. And in order to keep it sustainable and to keep it natural, then you kind of have to find natural fertilizers, natural pest control. But one other thing that I happen to find out in this whole journey of learning about this is, when you think of what grows in Sri Lanka, some of the actual produce or vegetables and fruit that were growing in Sri Lanka were different vegetables and fruit. And I've been looking for those seeds. And what I found is, when you plant those natural fruit and vegetable of Sri Lanka, you don't even really need the fertilizer or the pest control, because our soil is built for those products. So it becomes as natural as you're going to get it. But the problem is, for some reason, which I haven't quite understood yet, which I'm still searching, you cannot quite find those vegetables and fruit in Sri Lanka anymore. So one of the aims or visions I have is to actually find those vegetable and fruit, grow them, understand the difference, and start introducing some of these things back into our Sri Lankan culture and economy. And it might be in a niche scale, it might not be commercial, but I find I'd love to know more about the different varieties of fruit and vegetable, and you know learn to cook, do my recipes with some of these um, um, fruit and vegetable also. So so I find, or at least my aim is to try and take this farm to introduce a lot of what was growing in Sri Lanka a long time ago, and try and understand the difference and make it more, user friendly, or uh, available, as well as to talk about what recipes, what's the nutritional value, all those kinds of things. To people out there. And one of the other things, just on a side note, is to mention, now, when you talk about COVID, a lot of people are trying to understand why in Asia, COVID doesn't seem to be as, it seems to be managed a little bit better, and, whether it's government or not. But realistically, some of the stories that I'm hearing and some of the research that I'm beginning to see is the kind of fruit and vegetable that we have in our Asian climates and the spices we use, etc., are actually natural deterrents. So I think there's a whole health side to eating what should be eaten in Sri Lanka, which is grown in Sri Lanka. So that is going to be my little niche to try and you know vocalize that and share more about that as I learn more about it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, so tell us a little bit about, and I'll probably mess this up, so you might have to correct me. Thambiliwatte, and how have
Okay.
others in Sri Lanka made strides to improve sustainability?
Okay, so Thambiliwatte, just to give you a little bit more insight into that, what the word means is Thambili is king coconut and Vatta is garden or grove. So the reason it has the name Thambiliwatte is because the what grows on it mostly is coconut and king coconut. So like me, what I have found is there are lots of people in Sri Lanka that have decided to have small farms like this and to start growing your own vegetable for two reasons. I think the feeling of when you are around green and doing basic work like working with the ground, etc., I think makes you feel a lot better. I must say I do. But also you can source healthier fruit and vegetable. And right now, with everything that everybody is talking about in terms of toxicity from what you breathe to what you drink to what you eat. So I think this is one of the reasons lots of people like me have decided to try their own. Um, so that so that industry, well, what I'm going to call the more organic or the good market sort of industry in Sri Lanka is growing quite a bit. And there are lots of people who are coming together to help each other out. So I have come across sites that are all about natural ways of growing, permaculture, what we can do more to get yield but in a more natural way. So all of that is happening at the same time. So those are people that we connect through internet. We know as friends, extended friends, etc. The new community that I'm beginning to connect with now is the actual farming community. Because you there again, you get two types of farmers. You have the farmers who are more commercially driven, who just don't pay attention to what is going into the land. And then you also have the farmers who, like the farmer I have on my land, who are really passionate and love the earth, and they love trying to keep it clean, keep some of the old ways going. Only thing is they need support because farmers are somehow at the bottom of the food chain when you think of economics in Sri Lanka. So supporting these farmers with having these little farms versus the large commercial ones, I think make it a lot more lifestyle driven. The farmer has a better life. We are supplementing and helping these farmers actually do good work. And what I see is, when I think of the Thambiliwatte area, there are about another 10 farmers, with farms around, that are not doing farming the way that we think would be more healthy. So our job is, or one of our visions is to make this like a flagship farm so that other farmers can see what good, clean farming can look like, and then we can teach them some of the things that we have learned. We have connected with the agriculture department around. They are supportive in certain areas, but not enough. But with my resources and my network, I think I can connect um, the people who want to do good work and who have the resources and the network with these farmers who um, I think are the lifeblood of Sri Lanka, who can do so much more if we can support them.
Okay. Can you please explain what intercropping is?
Intercropping is, so now if you think of coconut and king coconut, these are tall trees that are spread all over the land. And because it's a bit of a big wide tree, once you grow that, yes, you do earn income, but you're not optimizing the soil um, by just growing those trees. So what we do is underneath the trees, you grow a different crop that doesn't need as much light, and it's a much smaller bush or tree, so that one you can use the soil and earn more so that your land is more economically viable, but also you start growing different things so that you give the nutrients required for the land so that you're not just growing the same thing over and over again. So intercropping is kind of mixing it all together so that you can earn more money at the same time, keep your soil um, healthy.
Okay. I actually have one comment, but first,
Yeah.
before I say the comment, I want to ask you the question. What's the difference between a coconut and a king coconut?
Oh, good point. So good point. So a coconut is, I think, what you'll all know, where you have the brown husk, you have the white kernel inside, and you have the water. And coconut, as you know, worldwide is you use the kernel where you scrape the kernel, you use the white pieces that you get for the coconut milk, which is a very healthy option instead of dairy milk, etc. And it's used in a lot of cooking, and it's one of the healthiest forms of. It's a superfood, if I'm not mistaken. King coconut ha- can be described in the same way, as in it does have the big hard shell, it does have the kernel inside, and it does have the water. But first of all, in Sri Lanka, king coconut is orange, it's not green. The white kernel inside is a lot softer, so you can eat it, you can scoop it out and eat it. So you can't do milk, etc., from it like you do coconut. And the water is actually the most valuable part of the king coconut. It's a lot tastier. And in Sri Lanka, we mix that when we're making juices, etc., because it's considered to be uh, like a natural a natural form of saline, or hydration. So a king coconut is a lighter fruit. It doesn't make as much money as coconut, hence maybe why it's not as popular or as well known. But it's a fruit for hydration, and it's a lot more fun to have than coconut.
Okay.
And it's a lot more. It's prettier to look at. It's orange instead of the green.
All right.
I hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, So actually, we're going to probably take a break pretty soon, or maybe continue the interview at another time. But I just want to, we do on this program, we actually have a, you can call it an episode, that we actually talk about turmeric and
Yeah.
ginger. I was wondering if that's something that you're going to be growing on this farm, or you're
Yeah.
thinking about growing on this farm.
That's funny. Those are the exact two things that I'm going to use as intercropping under the coconut trees, ginger and turmeric.
Okay.
So I will be starting in January because I missed the first season with COVID because we were busy trying to get other things organized. But January is when we start actually growing the both of those, and those are very well grown in Sri Lanka. And turmeric is used a lot in our Sri Lankan cooking. So that's really something well, ginger too, but turmeric especially. I think ginger is used all over the world, but I don't think turmeric is used that much in your parts of the world, right? So those are two obviously very useful crops that I'm planning to intercrop with, as well as the third one I'm looking at is aloe, which I'll learn more about in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're definitely going to have to follow up with you when you start growing those turmeric and ginger. But I know for sure in the living superfood world and in Umoya's world, turmeric is a staple, and that's something I use
Oh, okay.
every day.
Excellent. How do you use turmeric? Is it just in your cooking, or do you do other things with it?
Yeah, everything from cooking. I can take it in a powder form. I might take it with some shakes.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, just pretty much anything. Let's see what else. Yeah, it's pretty much cooking, and then like I'll put it into my shakes, like in my juices. Like I'll blend my juice and put it in. Like I might use like a coconut blueberry. Maybe put like a scoop or like a teaspoon of turmeric in it. Some I know some people make teas with turmeric. I don't do that, but I know other people do. So that's kind of how I use it. Do you have any recommendations in terms of how you use turmeric?
Yes. So for me and my son, we don't take any Western medicine. So one of the immune boosters I use is a teaspoon of turmeric, bees honey, a squeeze of lime. And if you have ginger, you can put ginger also into it. I make it into a little shot glass, like a tequila shot glass, and I give it to him every morning.
Okay.
That's how I get it into him. But the same, so that is an immune booster, and that's a guaranteed immune booster, especially through COVID. I have made sure he and I do it at least twice or three times a week, every morning. And because now that we've gotten used to it, I tend to we love lime juice in Sri Lanka. It's lime more than lemon here. And I find putting a bit of turmeric into that juice, that might be more for taste because turmeric, I think, is better when it's drunk warm than cold, as far as I know. Um, is kind of nice as a different taste when you're doing your lime juice to put a little bit of turmeric into it. So yeah, well, I love my turmeric too.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go ahead and take a break now, and hopefully we'll be able to continue the conversation. And so, audience, stay tuned. This is the Living Superfood Show, and we're speaking with Bani from Sri Lanka.